Okay, groovy guys, groovy gals. I made this especially for my 5th period class. We're going to cover some of the material we missed yesterday being in the library and some of the material you're going to miss today. If you know someone in my 5th period class, I suggest you call them and tell them to watch this video. The test will still be on Friday. Let me repeat that. The test will still be on Friday. Everything's on Blackboard. Everything's here. You should be fine. One thing you need to know is this question right here. What is produced with this formula? The answer is glucose, which is a sugar, and oxygen that the plants use. Now for a quick review of everything before the test. We talked about organisms. They can be unicellular or multicellular. They're the first step. From there, we talked about habitats and the fact that organisms live in different habitats based on their requirements. Talked about biotic factors, which are living things, and we talked about abiotic factors, the non-living parts of an organism's habitat. Those would include things like water, air, soil, sunlight, temperature. Moving on from there, we talked about populations. We talked about the fact that populations are all the certain species of an organism. So it's one species of a type of organism that live in an area. Communities are all the populations that live in a specific area. So it would be all the rabbits, all the snakes, all the hawks that live in a certain area. Then we talked about a community, which is all the populations, plus the abiotic factors together make an ecosystem. Moving on from there, we talked about succession and the idea of primary succession, where there's new land, either from a glacier melting exposing new rock soil, new rock, or from a volcanic explosion that's caused rock to form. From there, pioneer species come in, like lichens and moss. They break down the soil, they break down the rock to make soil. Over time they die, they add nutrients to it, and over time seeds arrive. We start getting plants. From plants we go to bushes, and from bushes we can go to trees. This can take up to almost 2,000 years. From there we talked about secondary succession. In secondary succession, the soil is already established there, but some natural disasters occur. It can also be a man-made disaster. Something like a forest fire, a hurricane, a tornado has come in, it's destroyed the area, and now the habitat has to regrow. This takes less time because the soil there is already established. Then we talked about energy flow in an ecosystem, and we said that all energy enters an ecosystem through sunlight, and that it affects producers. Producers use photosynthesis. So here the producers are using sunlight to make their own food. Their food is called glucose, and they release oxygen when they do this. In photosynthesis, the plant takes in carbon dioxide and water. It releases glucose and oxygen. That's the oxygen that we breathe. Chloroplasts hold the chlorophyll where this takes place. Mitochondria, right there in the center, is the powerhouse of the cell. Then we talked about consumers. They're the organisms that feed on the producers. Consumers can't make their own food, so they eat producers, and sometimes they eat other consumers. We are considered consumers. Okay, types of consumers include herbivores, they eat plants. Carnivores eat other animals, some sort of meat. Omnivores, like ourselves, eat both plants and animals, sometimes at the same time. Decomposers then break down the dead material and waste in an ecosystem. So you're going to have consumers, decomposers, and producers in an ecosystem. Humorous look, always get a laugh out of that one. Energy pyramids, where we picked up yesterday. Producers are at the bottom of the energy pyramid. The most energy is down here where the producers are located. Why is most of the energy there? Because there's a lot of producers, so that means a lot of energy. At each level, when the primary consumers eat the producers, they use some of that energy, so that energy is lost. From there, they're eaten by secondary consumers. Some of the energy, remember, the primary consumers took in, they used to carry on life processes, so that's why that energy is burned up or used. And secondary consumers eat them, so there's less energy. This happens up the pyramid. That's why it's in a pyramid shape. The biggest amount of energy is at the bottom, the least is at the top. We also talked about changes in population. Pretty basically, if a birth rate increases and a death rate and your birth rate is greater than your death rate, you'll have an increase in population. If your death rate is greater than your birth rate, you'll have a decrease in population. Then there's immigration and emigration. Immigration, people moving or organisms moving into a population, that would be immigration. Organisms moving out of a population would be emigration. You do have to know these. I highly recommend you look at your notes. We talked about population density. Example, 10 deer per square kilometer. If I were to ask you, you've got 8 acres and you've got 16 deer, what would the population density be? The answer would be 2 deer per square acre. How did I get that? I've got 16 deer divided by the 8 acres. That means there's on average 2 deer per acre. Moving on, we talked about natural selection. In natural selection, that's the theory that organisms and their offspring that have the best genetic traits for the environment they live in will survive and thrive. In other words, if you're a slow antelope, you're not going to survive, so you will not pass on your genes. If you're a fast antelope, you will survive and pass on your fast genes to other antelope. So eventually, the entire species is upgraded by this. Adaptations is a characteristic that makes it easier for an organism to live in their environment. For instance, the adaptation here is that the frog looks like the bark on the tree, and that's known as camouflage. Examples also include false coloring, protective covering, like a turtle, warning colors saying that you're dangerous or poisonous, like a coral snake. Limiting factors, things that are going to limit the population in an area, include limited food and water. If you don't have enough food, you won't be able to support all the population. If you don't have enough water, you won't be able to support the population. This can lead to a population decrease. When you've hit carrying capacity is the maximum number that an area can support. It has the right food, water, climate to support so many members of a population. Niche. Niche, also pronounced niche, is a role an organism plays in its habitat. In other words, it's its job, what it does in that community. Now it could be, for instance, bats. Bats eat mosquitoes. That's their niche. They keep the mosquito population down. If the number of bats die off, then the population of mosquitoes will increase. Things will be out of balance. So it's the job that an organism has. I suggest you go back and look at these videos. Example of niches include the Cape May warbler, the bay-breasted warbler, and the yellow-rumped warbler. 3 different types of birds live in different parts of the trees. That way they're not competing with each other for the resources they need. Community interactions. Okay, in community interactions, competition. That's a struggle between 2 organisms to survive as they both attempt to use the same limited resources. In other words, they're trying to occupy the same niche or niche. What's going to happen is one will die out. Think of it as a business. If you open a donut shop and your friend opens a donut shop next to you, one of you will probably survive in the business and the other will have to go out of business. Predition. The eating of all community interactions include predition, which is the eating of another member of a community for food. Okay, as the number of predators decreases, the number of predators, the amount of prey decreases, the number of predators will also decrease because they won't be able to sustain. Community interactions continued. Symbiosis. There are 3 types. Symbiosis is a close relationship between 2 species that benefits at least one of the species. Mutualism. We both benefit. This is an example of mutualism over here. These are called cowbirds. They're on the back of the rhino. They eat bugs on the rhino. The rhino doesn't have bugs on him. They get food. That's mutualism. Commensalism. One benefits and one is neither harmed nor helped. Okay? Parasitism. One benefits, the other is harmed. Ticks and dogs are a great example of this. In this one, the dog does not benefit from it. He is harmed, but the ticks are able to flourish. Going on to the next page, let's try it. A remora, that's him right there, is a fish that attaches itself to the underside of a shark without harming the shark and eats leftovers. What is this an example of? That's an example of commensalism. One benefits, the other is neither help nor harm. A vampire bat drinks the blood of horses. That's parasitism. One benefits, the other is harmed. Bacteria living in a cow's stomach helps them to break down cellulose and grass. That's mutualism. Bacteria get food, and the cow gets the cellulose broken down. All right, at this point, that's everything we want to talk about. This we're going to cover next week, so you don't have to worry about this part. I will go back over the notes. I would go back over this PowerPoint, just like I just showed you. I would look at everything, and I would review the notes, and I would review the PowerPoint. Everything is on Blackboard, and I want to wish you luck one last time. The test will be on Friday, even if we don't have school on Thursday. Thank you.